Manila's tropical rain poured heavily over the bustling streets of Makati district, transforming the asphalt into mirrors that reflected the neon lights of commercial buildings. Among the skyscrapers that symbolized the Philippines' progress, Manny walked discreetly, wearing a simple cap and plain t-shirt, trying to blend in with the crowd rushing to take shelter from the storm. At 45, the legendary boxer had learned to treasure these moments of anonymity, when he could observe the real life of his people without being recognized. The aroma of adobo and pancit wafted from small street restaurants, mixing with the humid scent of tropical rain. Manny felt deep nostalgia as he walked through those familiar streets, remembering the days when he fought not only in the ring, but also against the poverty that plagued his family. Every corner of that city held memories of his journey, from the times when he sold cigarettes on the streets to becoming the Philippines' national pride. People around him conversed in Tagalog, their voices blending with the intense traffic noise and the constant sound of rain hitting zinc rooftops. Manny observed the tired faces of workers heading home after another day of labor, recognizing in each of them the same determination that had driven him throughout his career. The tropical air's humidity made his clothes stick to his body, but he continued walking unhurriedly, absorbing the pulsating energy of his hometown. A street vendor offered balut and taho on the corner, his voice echoing through the rain as he pushed his cart through the flooded streets. Manny smiled discreetly, remembering when he himself had sold products on the streets to help his family survive. The simplicity of that moment contrasted drastically with the glamorous life he had known in recent years, but it was exactly this authenticity that he loved most about his country. As he walked toward a covered parking garage to shelter from the rain, Manny reflected on the changes he had witnessed in the Philippines throughout his career. The country had modernized, new buildings had been constructed, but the essence of the Filipino people remained the same: resilient, hardworking, and full of hope. It was this connection to his roots that kept him humble, even after all the achievements and worldwide recognition. The parking garage entrance appeared before him like a refuge from the tropical storm. Manny quickened his pace, eager to find a dry place where he could wait for the rain to subside. He had no idea that this simple act of seeking shelter would completely change the course of his afternoon, and perhaps the life of someone who had been fundamental in his journey as a boxer. A sense of anticipation filled the air as he descended into the underground structure, unaware that destiny was about to orchestrate one of the most meaningful encounters of his life. The echoing footsteps on wet concrete seemed to announce the beginning of a story that would touch the very core of what it means to remember those who helped shape our dreams. The underground parking garage was dimly lit, with fluorescent lights flickering intermittently, creating dancing shadows between the concrete pillars. The air was saturated with the smell of motor oil and humidity. Manny descended the wet steps, hearing the echo of his footsteps reverberating off the concrete walls as he searched for a place where he could wait out the storm that was battering Manila. In the center of the parking garage, near a small makeshift booth, a man of approximately 60 years was carefully organizing orange traffic cones. His posture revealed years of heavy physical work, and his calloused hands moved with the precision of someone who had repeated those gestures thousands of times. He wore a simple parking attendant uniform, already faded from time and constant use, and his concentrated expression showed the pride he felt, even in this humble position. Manny watched the man work, admiring his dedication and attention to detail. Each cone was positioned perfectly, every movement had a specific purpose, demonstrating that he took his work seriously, regardless of how simple others might consider his function. The dignity with which he performed his tasks reminded Manny of his own life philosophy. Always do your best, regardless of circumstances. The sound of footsteps echoing through the parking garage made the attendant lift his head, and his eyes met Manny's for the first time. For a moment, an expression of confusion crossed his face, as if he was trying to recognize someone. But he soon returned to work, assuming it was just another customer seeking shelter from the rain. His humility was evident in the way he lowered his gaze again, respecting the visitor's personal space. Manny approached slowly, observing every detail of the man's face. There was something familiar about those features, in the way he held his shoulders, in the particular way he organized objects around him. A strange sensation began to take hold of the boxer, as if an old memory was trying to emerge from the depths of his mind, but he still couldn't define exactly what it was. The attendant continued his meticulous work, oblivious to the fact that he was being observed with such attention. His movements were economical and efficient, characteristics that Manny recognized as typical of someone who had dedicated years to training and discipline. It was as if each gesture was executed with the same precision required of a professional athlete, but applied to a completely different reality. The rain continued falling heavily outside, and the sound of drops hitting the parking garage roof created a hypnotic melody that filled the silence between the two men. Manny remained still, trying to decipher that feeling of familiarity that grew with each passing second. As he watched the attendant work with a dedication that transcended the simplicity of his current function. A gust of wind brought the aroma of sampaguita from the wet streets, mixing with the smell of fresh rain entering through the parking garage openings. Manny closed his eyes for a moment, letting that familiar perfume awaken dormant memories of his youth. It was then that an image began to form in his mind. A small, poorly ventilated gym with improvised punching bags and old ropes, where he had thrown his first serious punches in boxing. The attendant adjusted his posture as he lifted a signage board, and this specific movement made Manny's heart race. It was exactly how he remembered someone correcting his posture during training sessions, with that same gentle firmness and attention to detail. The man's hands, though now calloused from manual labor, still maintained the delicacy of someone who had once shaped champions with surgical precision. Manny began walking slowly through the parking garage, pretending to examine the parked cars, but actually observing every movement of the attendant. The way he organized the space, the meticulous manner in which he checked every detail, all of this echoed organizational techniques that Manny had learned decades ago. It was as if he was watching a familiar dance, performed by someone who had taught him those same steps. A specific memory emerged with crystal clarity. Gentle hands adjusting his boxing gloves, a patient voice explaining the importance of breathing during fights, experienced eyes observing every movement and offering precise corrections. Manny remembered the smell of liniment and sweat that permeated that modest gym, and how safe and guided he felt under that dedicated tutelage. The attendant stopped to wipe sweat from his forehead, and in this simple gesture, Manny finally recognized the person who had been fundamental in his early years as a boxer. Rolando Santos, his first serious trainer, the man who had seen potential in a poor street kid and had dedicated countless hours to polish him. The same man who now worked as a parking attendant, apparently forgotten by the world he had helped conquer. Emotion overwhelmed Manny in a devastating way. He remembered how Rolando had refused payment for months, investing his own time and limited resources to train a young man who barely had money to eat. He recalled the motivational conversations after painful defeats, the modest celebrations after important victories, and how this man had planted the seeds of discipline and determination that would take him to the top of the world. Now watching Rolando work with the same dedication as always, but in such different circumstances, Manny felt a mixture of gratitude, sadness, and determination. He knew he needed to do something, but also understood that he needed to approach the situation with the delicacy the moment required. After all, Rolando maintained his dignity even in this humble position, and that deserved all the respect in the world. Manny slowly approached the small booth where Rolando organized his personal belongings. On an improvised shelf, he noticed an old photograph in a simple frame. It was a faded image of a young boxer in fighting stance, wearing red shorts and worn gloves. With a tightening in his heart, Manny recognized himself in that photograph taken more than 20 years ago, when he was still just a dreamer with fast fists and infinite determination. The former trainer held a small portable radio, tuned to a local station broadcasting sports news. Ironically, the announcer was talking about preparations for a national tribute to Manny Pacquiao, mentioning his historic achievements and his importance to Filipino pride. Rolando listened in silence, with an expression that mixed pride and melancholy, as if he was reliving memories of a time when he was part of that glorious story. Manny observed how Rolando reacted to the news about him. There was no bitterness or resentment in the former trainer's eyes, only genuine satisfaction for someone's success whom he had helped shape. It was as if, for Rolando, the fact that he had contributed to Manny's journey was reward enough, even though the world had forgotten his fundamental participation in those crucial early years. A raindrop falling from the ceiling landed on the photograph, and Rolando quickly wiped it with a clean cloth. demonstrating the special care he had for that memory. For him, that image represented much more than just an old photo. It was tangible proof that he had made a difference in someone's life, that his work had meaning even when no one else remembered. Manny felt a lump in his throat as he realized that Rolando had kept that photo all these years, even after his circumstances had changed drastically. It was evident that the former trainer had never sought recognition or financial compensation. His satisfaction came simply from knowing he had fulfilled his role in shaping a champion. This genuine humility deeply touched the boxer's heart. The sound of cars entering the parking garage interrupted the moment of silent observation. Rolando immediately sprang into action, guiding drivers with precise and professional gestures, demonstrating that he took his current responsibilities as seriously as he had taken boxing training in the past. His upright posture and decisive movements revealed that regardless of the function he performed, he would always maintain the standards of excellence that had characterized his entire life. Manny remained there, discreetly observing his former mentor work, carefully planning how to approach the situation. He knew that Rolando was a proud man who valued his independence and dignity above all else. Any gesture of help would need to be offered respectfully, preserving the self-esteem of the man who had been so important in his formation as both a person and an athlete. A group of tourists entered the parking garage, chatting animatedly about the Manila tourist spots they planned to visit. Rolando attended to them with professional courtesy, explaining in simple English how the billing system worked and where they should park. Manny observed how his former trainer maintained the same patience and attention to detail he had demonstrated during their training sessions, treating each customer with genuine respect, regardless of their origin or social status. When the tourists moved away, Manny finally approached the booth, trying to control the emotion growing in his chest. Rolando looked up and for the first time seemed to really focus on him. An expression of surprise began to form on his face, followed by momentary confusion, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His eyes moved quickly between Manny's face and the old photograph on the shelf. "Sorry to bother you," Manny said in Tagalog, maintaining a casual and respectful tone. "I'm waiting for the rain to stop." Rolando nodded politely, but Manny could see the recognition growing in his eyes. The former trainer was clearly processing the situation, trying to reconcile the presence of the famous boxer with the reality of his current work. There was a mixture of surprise, pride, and perhaps a touch of embarrassment in his expression. Manny pretended interest in the parking rate information, using this as a pretext to prolong the conversation. Rolando patiently explained the procedures, his voice maintaining the same calm cadence that Manny remembered from their old training sessions. It was surreal to hear that familiar voice talking about such mundane matters when it used to give advice about boxing techniques and combat strategies. "Have you been working here long?" Manny asked, genuinely interested in his former mentor's story. Rolando explained that he had started there about 5 years ago after ending his activities as a trainer. He spoke about the work with dignity, explaining how he had adapted to new responsibilities and how he appreciated the stability the job provided him, even though it was very different from his previous life. The rain began to gradually subside, and Manny knew that soon he wouldn't have an excuse to remain there. He watched Rolando organize some papers on his improvised desk, noticing how his hands trembled slightly, perhaps from age, perhaps from the emotion of talking to someone who had been like a son to him. The situation was delicate, and Manny understood that he needed to act wisely so as not to hurt the pride of a man who had always valued his independence. The moment was coming to an end, but Manny didn't want to simply leave without doing something meaningful. He looked once more at the old photograph, then at the man who had believed in him when no one else did. He knew he needed to find a way to repay all that dedication and affection, but in a manner that would preserve Rolando's dignity and honor the special relationship they had shared during those formative years. Manny took a pen from his pocket and wrote something on a piece of paper, then handed it to Rolando along with enough cash to cover the parking fee. "Thank you for the exceptional service," he said, maintaining direct eye contact for the first time. Rolando looked at the paper and read the handwritten words, "To Coach Rolando Santos, who taught me that the real fight happens outside the ring. With eternal gratitude, Emmanuel." Rolando's hands trembled visibly as he recognized his real name being used, along with the affectionate nickname Coach that only his closest pupils used. his eyes filled with tears that he tried to disguise, pretending to adjust the old photograph on the shelf. The emotion was palpable in the humid air of the parking garage, two men connected by a story of dedication and transformation that transcended any difference in current status. "You remember me?" Rolando murmured, his voice laden with emotion. It wasn't a question, but a statement full of surprise and gratitude. Manny nodded, explaining how he could never forget the man who had believed in a street kid when no one else saw potential there. He told how he still used techniques that Rolando had taught him, how the values of discipline and respect continued to be fundamental in his life. Rolando then shared his own perspective of those years. He spoke about how he had seen something special in Manny from the first day, a rare combination of natural talent and unwavering determination. He explained that he had never expected recognition or financial return. His motivation had always been genuine passion for developing young talents and helping them reach their maximum potential. For him, seeing Manny conquer the world had been the greatest possible reward. "I watched all your fights," Rolando confessed, pointing to a small old television in his booth. "Even when I couldn't afford pay-per-view, I found a way to watch. With each of your victories, I felt as if it was mine too, because I knew I had planted some of the seeds that flourished in your career." His words deeply touched Manny, who realized how his journey had continued to mean so much to his former trainer. Manny explained that he had spent years looking for Rolando, wanting to reconnect with him and properly express his gratitude. He told how he always mentioned his first trainers in interviews, but people were more interested in the glamorous stories of the famous trainers he had later. "But you were the first to believe," Manny said, "and that's worth more than any title I've ever won." The conversation was becoming increasingly emotional, and both men struggled to maintain composure. Rolando admitted that he had gone through financial difficulties in recent years, especially after health problems forced him to abandon boxing training. But he emphasized that he had never regretted his choices, and that he had found dignity and purpose even in his current work, always maintaining the philosophy of giving his best in any situation. Manny asked for a few minutes to make an important call, explaining that he wanted to resolve something before the rain stopped completely. Rolando watched curiously as the famous boxer conversed on the phone in English, apparently discussing financial and legal details with someone from his management team. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes, during which Manny gestured with the same intensity he demonstrated during his post-fight interviews. When he finished the call, Manny turned to Rolando with a serene but determined expression. He explained that he had just instructed his team to create a consultancy specialized in developing young boxing talents, and that he would like Rolando to consider taking on the technical coordination of the project. It wouldn't be charity, he emphasized, but adequately paid work, taking advantage of all the experience and wisdom that Rolando had accumulated over the years. Rolando was initially speechless, processing the unexpected proposal. Manny explained that the project would involve identifying and training promising young boxers from underprivileged communities, offering them not only technical training, but also education and family support. "You always knew that boxing was more than punches and dodges," Manny said. "You taught me about discipline, respect, and perseverance. Now I want you to teach that to a new generation." The former trainer expressed his concerns about being away from the boxing world for so long, questioning whether he would still have the necessary skills for such an ambitious project. Manny smiled, reminding him of how he had organized the parking garage with military precision, how he had treated each customer with professional respect, and how his eyes still shone when he talked about training techniques. "You never stopped being a trainer," Manny said. "You just changed arenas." Rolando asked for time to consider the proposal, explaining that he needed to process everything that was happening. Manny understood perfectly, offering him a week to think about the opportunity. He also left his personal contact information, something he rarely did, demonstrating the importance he attributed to that relationship. "Regardless of your decision," he said, "I want you to know that you were never forgotten and that your contribution to my life was invaluable." The rain had stopped completely, and rays of sunlight began to penetrate through the parking garage openings, creating golden beams that illuminated the previously dark environment. It was a symbolically perfect moment, representing the hope that was being reborn in both men's lives. Rolando firmly held Manny's card, as if he was holding a precious talisman. Manny embraced his former trainer with the same affection and respect as years ago, feeling as if an important cycle was completing in his life. He had found not only a lost friend, but also a way to repay the emotional investment that Rolando had made in his formation. It was more than justice, it was love in action, demonstrating that true human bonds transcend time and circumstances. A week later, Manny was in his office when he received the call he had been anxiously awaiting. Rolando's voice sounded renewed, filled with an energy he hadn't shown in years. He had accepted the proposal, explaining that he had spent the entire week dreaming about the possibility of returning to do what he loved most, developing young talents and transmitting values through sport. "I felt like I was waking up from a long sleep," he said emotionally. Preparations for the new project began immediately. Manny organized a meeting with his financial team to properly structure the consultancy, ensuring that Rolando would have not only a decent salary, but also health benefits and a professional work structure. He wanted his former trainer to feel valued and respected, not as someone receiving help, but as a competent professional taking on an important responsibility. Rolando left his parking garage job with dignity, thanking his former colleagues and ensuring a smooth transition for his replacement. His ex-colleagues were surprised to discover his connection to Manny Pacquiao, but not totally shocked. There had always been something special about the way Rolando conducted his work, a precision and dedication that suggested a more complex past than it appeared. The first gym of the new consultancy was established in Quezon City, in an area where many young people from working families could have access to the program. Rolando personally supervised every detail of the setup, from selecting equipment to training technical assistants. His experience and attention to detail impressed everyone involved, confirming that Manny had made the right choice in bringing him back to the boxing world. 3 months after the reunion in the parking garage, the first group of young boxers began training under Rolando's guidance. Manny visited the gym regularly, not as an owner, but as a respectful student, observing how his former trainer applied the same personal development techniques he had used with him decades ago. It was moving to see Rolando in his natural element, radiating passion and wisdom to a new generation. The story spread discreetly through the Filipino boxing community, not as a publicity stunt, but as a genuine example of gratitude and loyalty. Other veteran boxers began seeking out their forgotten former trainers, creating a silent movement of recognition and appreciation for the masters who had remained in the shadows. Manny had initiated something bigger than he imagined, a culture of not forgetting those who planted the seeds of success. Rolando Santos never worked as a parking attendant again, but he carried with him the lessons of humility and dignity that period had taught him. In his new office, he kept the same old photograph of Manny, now accompanied by new images of his current young pupils. For him, each face represented a new opportunity to make a difference, a new chance to plant seeds that could flourish into champions not only of boxing, but of life.
Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.